Netflix Standing by Dave Chappelle and The Closer. That is a stand-up special, The Closer. Netflix Standing by Dave Chappelle and The Closer. Let's take a listen to this short video.
Rowling wrote all the Harry Potter books by herself. She sold so many books, the Bible worries about her. And they canceled her because she said in an interview, and this is not exactly what she said, but effectually, she said gender was a fact. And then the trans community got mad. They started calling her a TERF. So I looked it up. TERF is an acronym. Stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. I'm Team TERF. I agree, man. Gender is a fact.
Right, so joining me now is activist and writer Raquel Willis. Raquel, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. So let's talk about some things here and why there's been such criticism and see what we come up with here. Because he made the joke. The critics are saying, look, you have to consider what's happening during this last historic year of anti-transgender legislation introduced at least in 33 states, less than a year after a record high number of transgender people, most of them trans women of color, were killed. So what did you think? And you have to keep in mind, he is a comedian, right? But what did you think when you heard this?
Well, when I watched the special, I felt kind of disheartened that he was continuing this attack on the trans community. Now, I think we love to say, oh, comedians are just telling jokes. Like, that's what they do. But I think it ignores the fact that they have platforms, and those platforms, the rhetoric that they espouse has real world consequences for a lot of cisgender straight people who don't know trans people in their everyday life. Their first interaction with trans people is through the media. It's through what they watch, through what they read. And so the only things that they hear are these constant misconceptions about our experiences, demonizing words about who we are, saying that we're not women if we're trans women, saying that trans men are not men, and on, then they're going to actually bring that into their everyday lives. And that's why we see high rates of violence. At least 38 trans and gender nonconforming folks have been murdered this year. We will continue to see more pieces of legislation put forth that actually impact young trans people. And so I think that's also the other thing too, is that people get so fixated on the adjective of trans, right? The trans part of it, but we are human. And I think that Chappelle did a sloppy job of speaking to our humanity.
Yeah, there's a part in there where he talks about his friend, right? And he said, his friend said, I'm not asking you to understand. I'm just asking you to listen, and I'm telling you that I'm having this experience and that I'm a human being. So is there any part that is redemptive in there, or is there anything you would like to, if you had a discussion with Chappelle, what would you say to him?
Well, I think what's unfortunate is that he has not really grappled with the fact that as a Black, cisgender, straight man, he could have easily used his platform to talk about the tensions that exist within our own community as Black folks, right? I think that there's a way that he and other Black, cisgender, straight comedians kind of gloss over the fact that Black LGBTQ plus folks exist. And so it's easy for him to paint the LGBTQ plus community as purely just a white community. There are all these ideas that queerness and transness, all these different things are white inventions. And that's just not true. Black LGBTQ plus folks have always existed. And I really wish he didn't spend so much time only focusing on the fact that there are white people within our community, because it lets him get off the hook. He doesn't have to hold himself accountable for the transphobia and homophobia that exists within our own community.
Wow. just listening to that, and what the lady really said is very true. Also, we need to like talk about the LGBTQ issues among our communities as Black folks. Netflix is defending Dave Chappelle's new comedy special after it had been criticized as transphobic by some LGBTQ advocates, artists, and employees. Chappelle's special The Closer, which the book on Netflix last week, includes several minutes of jokes about trans people. The comedian says in the special he is termed TERF, referring the term of trans exclusionary radical feminists. Gender is a fact, Chappelle says. Every human being on earth has to pass through the legs of a woman to be on earth. This is a fact. He talks about backlash he received after making jokes about Caitlyn Jenner and other trans people in the previous specials. Critics cancel culture around the author J. K. Rowling and reference his friendship with Daphne Dorman, a trans woman and fellow comedian open for him at one of his San Francisco shows. Dorman died by suicide in 2019, which Chappelle addresses in The Closer. In an October 8th email to employees from Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos and obtained by Verge and Variety, several of you have asked why. Several of you have also asked where we draw the line on hate. We don't allow titles on Netflix that are designed to incite hate or violence, and we don't believe the closer crosses that line. I recognize, however, that distinguishing between commentaries and harm is hard, especially with stand-up comedies which exist to push boundaries. Sanders wrote to staff, some people find the art of stand-up to be mean-spirited, but other members enjoys it, and it is an important part of our content offering. Netflix has suspended three employees for attending virtual meetings of directors and vice presidents last week without notifying the meeting organizers in advance, according to a source without knowledge of the matter. One of the suspended employees is Tara Fields, a senior software engineer who identifies as queer and trans, publicly criticized the closer in the Twitter last week. Her suspension is due to her attendance at the meeting, not her tweets, according to the sources. It is absolutely untrue to say that we have suspended any employees for tweeting about the show. Our employees are encouraged to disagree openly, and we support their rights to do so, a Netflix spokesperson told CNN. He tweeted last week that Chappelle's special ridiculed the existence of trans people, promoting TERF ideology directly harm trans people. It is not some neutral act, Phil wrote. This is not an argument with two sides. It is an argument with trans people who want to be alive, people who don't want to be us. Phil ended her threats with the name of 37 trans and gender non-conforming people who have been killed throughout 2021. GLAD, the LGBTQ media advocacy group, has also condemned comments in the closer on Monday issued a statement in response to the news of the suspension and email from Sarandos. Netflix has a policy that content designed to incite violence or hate is not allowed on the platform, but we all know that LGBTQ content does exactly that. While Netflix is home to groundbreaking LGBTQ stories, now is the time for Netflix X to listen to LGBTQ employees, industry leaders, and audiences and commit to living up to their own standards, the organizers tweeted. In the closer, Chappelle says the special will be the last time he will publicly comment on trans people or issues. Let's hope so. It's really. First, I'm gonna say all the 37 trans people who have been killed this year. My condolences to their family and their friends. It's really sad. I don't know why people keep killing trans people. Everybody is entitled to their own body and onto to whatever they want to do with their body, right? So if they want to be trans, they are free to be trans. They want to be straight, they're free to be straight. Everybody's entitled to their own body and do whatever they want to do with their bodies. You know, condolences to them and the family and their families.